Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome to another very exciting, electrifying tutorial. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a cool shot where Sam Loya is walking down the street when all of a sudden he is struck by lightning. What are the odds? As you know, it's close to Halloween, so, people gotta die. And let's take a look at what we're going to be creating. Okay, pretty gruesome, and if we kind of look closely, we can see that he gets struck by lightning and then very quickly explodes, and there's chunks and blood, and you can even see kind of hot, burnt edges on his pant legs. And I assume that's from wearing, some sort of women's underwear, and the thin fabric has heated up rapidly, causing a fringe to be left over there. So pretty cool effect. A lot of blood on the lens here. I've got the lightning and sparks, and by the way, all of the wet water look and rain and sky is also replaced from the original shot. So we are going to do a sky replacement. We're going to add some rain. We're going to add some of this wet puddle look. Now, we are going to be doing a lot of things right inside of After Effects, namely the rain and the lightning, but we're also going to be using a few elements from our Action Essentials 2 collection. So that collection is right here. We're going to be using the 720p version, $99, and you get 500 pre-keyed high-definition elements, all sorts of stuff from explosions and blood and fire and guns and all of the stuff you need to make cool action sequences and gory adventure movies also. But by no means is that the main part of the tutorial. We're going to really be doing a lot of cool things. So we'll go ahead and close this. Real quick, I'll just kind of show you the evolution here. Here was an early example that I did. So the idea was he gets struck by lightning, but he's still there, and maybe his face is burned out. The blood was actually added last just because it's Halloween and, people got to die. Another interesting kind of example here is where the lightning strikes and he immediately explodes. So all in all, there's some different things to take from the tutorial, and let's go ahead and get started right now. So here we have our original footage, and we need to do a sky replacement. But before we do that, I want to make a few adjustments to our footage at the necessary point in time. Here is about when I want him to explode. So what we're going to do is duplicate the footage and move it over to the beginning so that there's a clean plate right here. Basically, we didn't shoot it fully clean, but there's enough room here where he's not standing that we can extract. So we'll take the rectangle tool and we're just going to cut out an area so that we have a clean plate for him to be standing on. And then we also want to hit T, we'll lower this to 50%. And then we want to cut out the area where his legs will be left over. So we can just go ahead, draw a mask, and we just want to kind of make it seem a little bit random. And I also staggered the legs so that one of them is higher than the other. And then we'll just add this part back in. So we'll change this to subtract, and we'll hit T and turn the opacity back up. So that leaves us with a couple of legs just sitting there, and we want to go ahead and just slide this over so that it pops on right at this point in time, which is just an arbitrary point in time, but you can decide when you want this to happen. And it pops a little bit, but we're going to probably fix that later on when we do all of the lightning flashes and all that stuff. So this is just important to get the shot going. We might also take the bottom layer here and freeze it at this point in time. And we can do that by right-clicking and choosing time, enable time remapping, set a keyframe for that point in time, and then right-click on the keyframe, and we'll set it to toggle hold keyframe. And what that will do is basically freeze it at that point in time. But the cool thing is the layer on top still has animating trees, so the shot still looks somewhat animated. You can tell that I've shot this on a tripod, and we also took about a 5-gallon bucket of water and poured it out on the ground so that it looks like it's been rained on. So now that we've cleaned our shot up and we've got the frozen legs, we can go ahead and pre-compose these two shots. So hold down Shift, Layer, Pre-compose, and we'll just call this footage, and we'll hit OK. Now we have a couple of sky replacement tutorials on the website, so I'm going to run through this part a little bit quicker since I don't want to be too repetitive. There's a lot of good information on those tutorials for doing sky replacement, so check those out. So I've gone into the footage comp where I have my original raw footage, and I'm going to create an adjustment layer. And we're going to add a curves adjustment, and we're going to take the pen tool, and I want to mask out this gradation right here. The idea here is we want to make the whole sky white, and that will just make our sky replacing a little bit easier. So we'll brighten this up and hit F, and we'll feather the mask a little bit so that it blends with our shot. And just move it over a little bit. Okay, so close that. Okay, we'll come over to our project and bring out the dark sky image, which is a picture of a sky I took a long time ago, and we're going to bring it out. We're going to put it underneath the footage, and then we're also going to duplicate the footage, Control D, and we're going to hit F4, or toggle the switches, and we're going to set the bottom one to Luma Matte, possibly Luma Matte inverted. And what that does is more or less keys out the sky. We'll go ahead, we'll call this matte. Now to keep it simple, we're going to pre-compose the matte into its own composition. We'll call this matte, and we'll move all attributes and open the new comp. Hit OK. So inside of this comp, so the first thing we'll do is add a tint effect, which is at the bottom there. And then we're going to add a levels adjustment, and we'll make some room here. And what I want to do is bring the input black all the way over so that we really darken out the image, and we'll scrub through here. We can see his face is still a little bit gray, so we'll slide this over to kind of get rid of that, and maybe move the white point over as well. So this is a pretty good matte, and we can always make some adjustments to it later, but that's the basic idea. We're also going to create a black solid, shut the eye off, and we'll just draw a line across the horizon here and back inside, and we'll use this to get rid of all of the white highlight specular areas here. So we'll turn that on. So now we have a pretty good matte. Then we'll go back into the footage comp, and you can see that our track matte is now getting rid of it pretty well. So we'll turn on our sky layer, and we'll zoom in, and I'm going to scale it down and squeeze it down. Then we're going to add a quick mask, and we'll set it to subtract, and we'll hit F and turn up the feathering amount. Now before we go on, let's do a bit of color correction. So we'll add a tint and a curves adjustment to our footage, and we'll turn the tint amount down just a bit, and I want to bring the curves adjustment down so that the footage is a little bit darker, a little bit more night-like. And then I also want to color correct our sky footage as well. So we'll brighten it up just a little bit, and we also need to create a background layer. So we'll make maybe a gray, bluish colored background, hit OK, and put that at the very bottom. So this is just to kind of get everything together and start compositing our scene. Now I want to give a little bit more contrast to our sky and possibly add a little bit of green blue into our SAM footage. So we'll punch up the green and also the blue as well. Okay, the next part of the tutorial, we're going to add some rain effects. Obviously, this is low budget. We didn't even have enough water to cover up the back area of the road, and the wardrobe is obviously a disaster. But we're going to do our best here. And one thing I like to do is turn up the comp exposure setting. So if we set that to 2, that just makes everything brighter, but doesn't actually affect the pixels in your work. It's just sort of a viewing option. So might even make it easier to see. Now you can see a little bit of fringing with the matte, and I won't get too much into that. Check out those advanced sky replacement tutorials, and we get into all that fun stuff. But for now, we're going to start adding some rain effects. So we'll start by creating a new solid, and we'll hit OK. We're going to call this drizzle. We'll come over to the effects and preset. We're going to type in drizzle, and we have the CC drizzle effect. We'll drop that on here. Now, one important thing, we want to make sure the layer solid is 50% gray. So right here in the RGB, we just set it to 127, 127, 127, something like that, half of 255, which is probably not even right, but close enough. And interestingly enough, I need to shut off my exposure setting. So here we have little drops of water that kind of ripple, and it's just kind of a cool effect. I'll probably make the solid a little bit larger, like 1500 by 1200, and hit OK. And we're going to set the transfer mode to overlay, and we're also going to make the layer a 3D layer. So switch that on. We'll take the rotate tool, and we're going to rotate this so that it lays on our surface. We also need to scale it down a bit. Now this is a very subtle effect, but it does make a big difference. So we need to make some adjustments. We're going to rotate the light perhaps, and move the light around even. Let's see. Just want to move it around until it looks like it's in a good position. We also can play around with the drip rate, so that's how many of these puddles that it's creating. We can also turn the spreading down so that they're a lot smaller. And the rippling is set to 1. That's how many little ripples there are. So you can play around with that also. So looks pretty good. The life, 1.5 seconds perhaps. So play around with the settings until you get something that you like. And then we're going to create a particle system. So we'll create a new solid, and we'll make it comp size and hit OK. We're going to add particle world. And remember, I really try to do as much as possible with the built-in tools of After Effects. And only sometimes is it make a much bigger difference to use a third-party plugin, or in this case later on we're going to be using some blood. And it's just because there isn't really a good way to create realistic blood, or in other cases there's not a really good way to do it with just After Effects. So as much as I try to use the built-in tools, sometimes you just have to reach for some of these other kind of products just to make things a lot better. But in this case, we're able to use Particle World to create some pretty convincing rain. We'll set the floor to off, and that way we just have our particles. And we're going to make a few different adjustments. Let's see, producer. Let's make it really wide and large on the radius, so we'll just spread this out. And we're going to move the position up so that the rain comes from up above, and you can also move the Z position of the rain, and so something like that. Now the rain's kind of going at an angle, so we'll turn the velocity down so that the particles just fall, or you can adjust it until you match the perspective of your scene. So we're actually kind of looking up, so it almost looks okay to be sort of coming towards us like that. But, you know, rain does all sorts of stuff. So the longevity, we'll turn that up. We want it to basically meet with the ground, and that looks pretty good. Now the gravity is going to be like the speed. So if you turn that up, you know, it'll rain a lot more harshly, and we'll go change the color here. And the thing about rain is we really want to make it, you know, subtle for the most part. You know, we don't want it to be too thick or too intense, and you know, we want to make it blend well. So keep that in mind. We'll turn the longevity down. You're going to play with the longevity and the gravity. Those two settings kind of go together. And we'll also push this up in the sky here. So that's a pretty good looking rain. Now it's using a line rendering mode, so we probably want to add a bit of a blur. So we'll do, you know, like a 0.5 blur, just so that it's not too sharp looking. And we'll also set the transfer mode to maybe screen and lower the opacity a bit, so it's just kind of a subtle effect. And also we can go into the options, and there's an opacity map that basically the life of the particle fades in and then it fades out. But the thing about rain, it's kind of sparkly and it only shows up in some ways. So one thing that you can do is kind of create, you know, a bit of a random, you know, life. And this may or may not help, but it's just going to make the rain look a little bit more, you know, sporadic and not so, you know, perfectly uniform. I don't know how well this is going to show up, but let's just do a quick preview and see what that's going to look like. I'll brighten it up just to make it easier to see. So there you can see it. It looks pretty good, and we'll go and switch that back to screen and lower the opacity so it's not so intense. Now, as an optional effect, we can go down here and bring out the window rain, and what that is just footage of sort of water going down a window, and we can bring that out. It's pre-keyed, so right when you bring it out, it's already there, and even just add a quick box blur. And we want to brighten it up, so we'll add a curves adjustment, and instead of brightening up the RGB, go to the alpha channel and turn that up. And that will increase it a bit. I'll turn the blur on. So this is just a nice way to give your shot a little bit more of a wet look. We're going to go ahead and shut that off for right now, but we'll turn it all back on at the very end. Okay, now it's time to add some lightning, and we're going to be using a built-in After Effects plugin. We're also going to be using some spark elements, and here's the idea. We have some big lightning bolts coming down, and some are behind Sam, some are in front, and there's a lot of flashing going on to really make it seem violent and sort of intense. So it's not a whole lot to it, but the key is just making it look like, you know, look at this. It's just ridiculous. Kind of reminds me of growing up. I used to draw Mortal Kombat scenes where, you know, there's like violent, you know, ninjas fighting each other, and you know, my teachers were very disturbed by it. I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, what's wrong with me?" And he said, "I don't know, son. I don't know." Actually, that didn't happen. Well, the conversation happened. It just didn't happen with anybody. I was just talking to myself. Obviously, anyone doing a scene like this is clearly disturbed, so hopefully all of you guys are very excited about it. So let's go ahead and start creating our lightning. We're going to start with a new solid, and we'll call it lightning. And we'll hit OK. Then we're going to come over to the effects and presets. We're going to type lightning, and we'll take the advanced lightning plugin, bring it out, and here we have a good looking lightning bolt. Now we could do some cool stuff with this. We could scale it down, maybe change the glow color, and put it in the background kind of far away here, and maybe create a flash. And instead we want to make it pretty thick, so we'll go to the core and we'll turn up the radius. I'm going to go pretty high on this. Now I'm going to move the start point here and the direction so that it's a little bit over top him. And we can play around with the conductivity state to, give us a different look. We want this to seem, pretty random. So, just play around with this. Also, we want to move the layer up so that it looks like the lightning strikes right at his feet. Now we have a bit of a sharp edge, so we'll add a linear wipe transition. So we'll turn that up and change the direction to 0, and we'll just move that until we're at the feet. We can move it down a bit here and turn it up, and then turn up the feathering amount here. Now we can also get, pretty fancy. We could give this a bit of a glow. I also like to add another glow using the glow filter, and just turn that up pretty high and change the transfer mode to add. I've also set it to be just 1 frame long here. I also want to create another lightning bolt out of just a solid layer. So we'll make it a light blue solid layer, hit OK, and we're going to draw our own shape, which is going to be more or less a box. And we'll set it to add, and we'll even copy the glow over to it. And the thing about this one is we want to make it behind our character. So we'll take the pen tool and we'll draw a shape around his head. And this doesn't have to be perfect because it's just going to be a really bright, bolt. So we'll just draw kind of a rough mask here. And we'll set it to subtract. So we'll turn that on. And so more or less it looks like the bolt is behind him. We can feather both of these masks, and that way it'll almost look like a light wrap of sorts. It really is just kind of a rough resemblance so that we can create the look of lightning all around our character here. So we'll go ahead, we'll make this 1 frame long, and you can just extend the handles of the layers there. And we'll turn our other lightning back on. And the idea here is just to create copies, move them over, and just vary the settings. So change the conductivity state, maybe turn the core thickness down a bit, duplicate it, move it over. Again, we'll change it up here. We really want this to look, very violent and very random. We also need to create an adjustment layer that we're going to add a curves adjustment to. So we'll brighten up the entire scene, maybe even add a little bit of blue, and maybe pull a little bit of the red down a bit. And we're going to make this 1 frame too. And by the way I'm making it 1 frame is I'm holding down Alt, hitting begin bracket, end bracket, and that just makes it 1 frame. It sets the in and out point to that 1 frame. So here we can duplicate that, Control D, move it around, and just add some random lights here. And another element we can do is if we duplicate this element, extend it for a few frames, and then hit T, and we're going to set the opacity at the beginning at 100, and then go over and we'll set it down to 0. So it's sort of creating a flash of light that fades out, and we can add that just to the very first one. And this way it's just more random light going on. You might also check out our plugin Twitch for adding some random light, but for this case I like to really control it, and play with the different elements. So let's keep going down the line here. We've got a few seconds to go before he actually blows up, so we need to add some lightning all the way up to the end there. So we need to make a few copies of the layers, so we'll go ahead, duplicate them, Control D, and maybe move them over, and then just go into the individual settings and randomize the values so that it looks a bit more random. Play with the core setting, and the conductivity state are a good place to start for creating some random looking effects. So play around with that and add enough till we get to the end, and then we can take a look at making him explode. Okay, so I've added several copies of all of the different effects, and for the very end right before he explodes, I want to take one of these flashes of lights and duplicate it so that it's extremely bright. And that way when it explodes, you won't be able to see that it sort of jumps to that position. And we're going to add some camera shake a little bit later. So all in all, we just want to make it seem really random and crazy. So the next thing I want to do is add some of these stock elements from the Action Essentials 2 collection. So we have a few different ones, and there's a whole gallery that you can look through, but I just picked out a couple of ones that work pretty well. We've got this firecracker effect here, which is just like a bunch of sparks shooting up. We've got slow sparks, so these sparks just kind of shoot out. And we've got welding sparks and some more welding sparks. So we're going to go ahead and bring these out. One thing I like to do is keep my comps somewhat organized. So we've just created all this random stuff, and now we have like 30 layers. Wow, we have a lot more than that. We have 60 layers. So I'm going to go ahead, hold down Shift, select all the layers, and choose Pre-Compose. And we're going to move all the attributes. We're going to call this Lightning and hit OK. Now it's very important because the transfer modes change and the look changes. So toggle the switches and turn on the collapse transformation, and that will make it so as if those layers are actually inside of this comp and are overlaying them properly. So just make sure to turn that switch on. Now before we get to the stock footage, you can see we have a pretty good effect as it is now. And we could add a particle system with some smoke, and you could probably use a particle system to create some sparks. But we're going to use some action elements just to save time and add a little bit more realism. So we'll bring those welding sparks out, line it up down here, and they're pre-keyed, but we want to set the transfer mode to add so that they're nice and bright, and we'll scale it down to the feet area. Now there's a little bit of a hard edge, so we'll add a ellipse mask. We'll double click, and we'll bring the mask options up. We'll turn up the feathering, and we'll bring the expansion in so that we don't see a hard edge, and instead it's just a nice soft edge. And so the key here, let me go ahead and make a few marks to kind of organize where this all should happen. So right here when the legs disappear, I'm going to make a comp marker. And the way you do that is you hit Shift, and you can do a number 1 through 10. And there we have a comp marker, and then I'm going to go back here to right before it starts. And Shift and the number 1. So that way I can focus on this range with my element. So we'll move our sparks over here. And that's good. It's just a nice, flash of sparks, and just makes it all look a little bit more intense. I'll go ahead, bring the tint effect on, and turn it down a bit, just so it's not as vivid. And then we'll go ahead and add some slow sparks, which is interestingly enough one of 2 elements that are not keyed out. And there's just so much fine detail in this particular shot that it's a little bit better to screen it, and that way we didn't have to crush any of the edges, and that way they look a little bit better, and you'll be able to see that as they kind of flutter away. We're going to go ahead, add a tint effect to this so they're not as bright, and we'll scale the element down, and we want to time it so that they kind of shoot out just at the right moment. So a little bit of editing going on here. The element comes on, the sparks are going everywhere, and it's supposed to look like a kind of a really crazy shot. Now we also have a firecracker element we're going to bring out, and we're going to scale this one down too. And we'll set the transfer mode to add as well. And we're going to rotate it a bit here, move it over, and then we can just start duplicating the elements here. Another thing I like to do is color code a like element. So our 2 firecrackers here, let's change the color to green, and then the slow sparks, we can make those orange, and the welding sparks, we could make those red. And that helps so that you know what elements are where, and then you can duplicate, this element, and you can move them around. You can flip them so that they don't look like the same element every time. Obviously, there's a ton of different elements to choose from, but it's always nice to randomize them as you work. We can add those welding sparks, move these over. And our slow sparks, we'll make another copy and we'll slide that over. And anytime you have, like a sharp edge, just add a quick mask. Hit M, set it to subtract, and then feather it out. And by feathering it, you just, you lose that hard edge, and then you lose it in the composite. And just one of the, tips of blending these elements together is, using masks and different tricks like that. So we can, duplicate a few more of these elements, and, again, we want to kind of randomize it so that it looks like, all sorts of stuff is going on here in this lightning blast. Poor Sam, he just gets himself in these tough situations. You think he'd know better by now, but, apparently not. Okay, let's go ahead and organize our scene a little bit. So we've got our firecrackers and our stock footage here. Let's go ahead and pre-compose those, and we'll call those, sparks. And we'll hit OK. And remember to turn on the collapse transformation switch so that everything looks the same. And also, I think I want to put the lightning above the sparks, and that way they'll get a little bit brighter there when the glows get turned on and things. So that'll be nice. Now I also want to organize our other layers. So since we're breaking everything up into its own category, let's take the rain and the drizzle and pre-compose that. So we'll hit pre-compose, call this rain, and we'll hit OK. Turn on the collapse transformation. We're also going to take our footage, our matte, our footage, and our sky, and we'll pre-compose that, and that'll be our background. And we'll hit OK. So now everything is just a little bit more organized. It looks exactly the same, but it's easier to see what's going on. Okay, so we've built our lightning strike. And in the next tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at actually making Sam explode from all of this extra energy. So tune in for that tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed it. My name is Andrew Kramer, and we'll see you next time.